Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network. Hi, this is Amit Doshi, and I wanted to thank each and every one of our listeners. It's been 2 years since I founded IVM, and it's been an amazing 2 years. We wanted to learn a little bit more about who is listening to our shows, and so we put together a short survey. The survey is anonymous, and we aren't going to be collecting any personal information. I would really appreciate it if you could take a couple of minutes out of your day and go to ivmpodcast.com/survey and fill it out. Thanks, and please keep listening.
Welcome to Sex Facts. I'm Siddhant.
I'm Dilnaz. And our topic for today's discussion is sexuality and disability.
Yes, it is.
Sexuality itself, which is tends to be a taboo topic, and that's the reason we have chosen it.
Because we like taboo topics.
Because we like taboo topics. Yeah. And disability is another very uncertain topic. You know, it's surrounded by uncertainty in society.
At least for us. And I think in general, you don't find too much about disabled people and how they feel about things.
Yeah, it's very uncertain, uncomfortable kind of topic, you know.
And that's right. We want to make you feel uncomfortable about this today.
Yes. That is our aim.
Yeah.
So, honestly, for me, when... not now, but a couple of years back, just the idea that disabled people want sex.
Yeah.
Disabled people have sex.
Right.
Disabled people like sex was itself I don't know why. I don't know what it is that I've been trained to think that these two things just don't go together. Like, I've been trained to think that disabled people are asexual.
Have you been trained to think that, or has no one trained you?
Maybe no one's
Because
trained me.
I know that sounded very zen and like judo on that thought there. But the point is, we don't get to talk about this, so there's nothing to talk about. There's a complete absence of knowledge here because no one addresses the issue. So what is it that you found out?
So honestly, actually, I think when I started thinking about it was a couple of years back, you know, when there was this recording of this Christopher Reeve, the actor-director, who got paralysis because he fell off a horse and stuff. And there was a program for him, and his wife had come up on stage to sing a song, and then she said all these beautiful, lovey thingies for him. Yeah. And at the end, she said, "Chris, you still do it for me, baby." And I was like, yeah, really? Do it for me, baby means they still must be having sex or what? Like one disabled person and one non-disabled person. And that kind of got me thinking that... And then kind of reading up and stuff like that. And then I realized these are all myths, Like they are literally myths. There are different... I mean, it might not be...
So did you find if they were really doing it for each other?
I don't know. I mean, I think maybe they are, you know, like maybe they aren't. Yeah. But no, then I started reading up, and it seems that there are so many other ways to... Like, they want sex,
Sure.
They love sex, they need sex, and there are different... I mean, it might not be always... Some of them might not be able to have intercourse.
Right.
But then there are so many other ways. In fact, there's also a word called outercourse.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that. You were telling me about this earlier. Yeah. And it sounded very fascinating. So what is this exactly?
It's basically an alternative option. So it's paths to sexual pleasure that don't involve exchange of body fluids. Okay. And that is called outercourse.
Okay.
So it can involve any alternative. It can
give us an example here. What do we got?
Like touch and just voice and... aroma and, you know, all those things are turn-ons, you know. Oral sex, it doesn't really need to always be
it doesn't,
an intercourse.
It doesn't need to be penetrative sex. Yeah.
So there was a lot of, I was reading up and there was a lot of research done, you know. So a lot of people, in fact, there was one scientist had done one research thing in which there are these nerve bundles, called sensory vages in women. Okay. So there was a research done in which there were some paraplegics, not quadriplegics.
Okay.
The difference
What's
was
the difference?
I was just going to... So quadriplegic is people who've lost sensation, so neck below. So all their four limbs, quadriplegic. So all their four limbs don't function. Paraplegic is when their lower body and the lower limbs don't function.
Okay.
Yeah, so there was a research done in which there were paraplegics, some 16 women who were paraplegics and 5 women who were normal, so-called, if I may be allowed to use the term normal. Yeah. They were given these tools to stimulate themselves in a lab and stuff. And only one of the so-called normal women had an orgasm, and some, I don't remember, but some 5 or 6 of the ones who were disabled actually had an orgasm. In fact, one had some 6 orgasms. One in the 2 years since she had her accident had never had an orgasm.
Right.
So the explanation behind is that there's this nerve bundle called sensory vagus.
It's a fascinating study. Yeah.
So it bypasses the spinal cord and it carries the nerve impulses directly to the brain from the genitals.
So it's not in the spinal nervous system.
So it's not in the spinal nervous system. It kind of bypasses your nervous system, which is normally through the spinal cord.
Okay.
And the doctors then kind of did those PET scans of those women, and they actually got those signals into the brain, the signals of pleasure.
Okay.
And when the women were asked, they said that they had the same experience of an orgasm before they had their accident.
Okay.
But injury upwards. So in the genital area where there was so-called no feeling. So there they did not sensation the orgasm.
Yeah.
But injury upwards. So above, waist above the brain, they had the regular experience of an orgasm.
Wow.
Because ultimately the biggest sex organ is the brain, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
that's actually a really good point.
Quite
And people
yeah.
keep thinking that means it's some kind of where putting together some kind of philosophical discussion. Oh, it's the brain. The brain does all of the things for you for
But
sex.
it's not. It's scientific
It's actually true. Your brain perceives things and then your body reacts to them in some ways. And vice versa, obviously. But the brain is the vital cog in this wheel that lets you know that this is a sexual experience.
Yeah. In fact, there was this other story of this guy called Ralph Biggs. This US guy. He was I think initially he was a professional psychologist and he was backpacking in India and he fell off a roof terrace and he then got paralyzed. He hurt his back, spinal cord got... and then a year after his accident, he kind of found himself nearing an orgasm when his girlfriend was gently massaging and sucking his thumb.
Thumb, okay.
So his thumb became his surrogate penis, is what he says.
Okay.
So whatever and in fact, it was different in the left thumb and right thumb. So I don't remember clearly which one, but he said that one of the left one became a receiver, and because it had more nerve endings, which made him get pleasure, and the right one became the giver thumb, which acted like his penis. So there's a scientific medical term called neural plasticity.
Okay.
So
that means the brain kind of remapped itself.
Yeah, it retrains the nervous system. To find out new pathways to give you pleasure.
So it's literally your body telling you that look, we know something has gone down, and there are gaps in your life right now, but these are the important things.
And we want you to get your life back on track.
We think sex is really important, so we're going to retrain your thumb to feel like this.
But it's amazing, what the body does for... That means sex is so important in life.
Yeah, your body and brain are telling you this, So let's take a little break. When we get back, we'll talk more about this.
Hey friend, so if you're listening to a podcast right now, you're probably some kind of a nerd. A nerd at heart, at least. So maybe, just maybe, you might like another podcast about nerds, by nerds, and for nerds.
It's called Geek Fruit, a community to unite estranged geeks from across India and later on the world. We talk about television, movies, science fiction, adventure, fantasy, etc. Anything nerdy, it's all here on Geek Fruit. You can catch a fresh episode every Monday and a retcon episode every Tuesday.
And you can check us out on iTunes, Audioboom, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. Like my favorite podcast app, the IVM podcast app. Give me my money, IVM.
Good plug.
Happy listening, you nerds.
Welcome back after the break. And our topic for today is sexuality and disability.
Go for it. Come on. She has a look in her eye right now, which says she's got something really heavy to tell me.
So I was kind of YouTubing a couple of videos.
Oh my God, you YouTube now?
Yeah, I
You
do.
went from Googling to YouTubing. Wow.
So I was just generally YouTubing big words and, trying to find. And there was a video that I found of a disabled girl called Nicole.
Okay.
And from that video, there was a link to a website.
Okay.
Which was called Sexual Device Manual for Persons with Disabilities.
It sounds very technical.
It's not. It's basically devices for people with disabilities in order
for them
to have sex, and there's a
Okay.
full manual on and there are different things. So that depending on the disability, there are different
because
devices available.
This is actually really important. When we say disability, it's not like disability applies to everybody
Yeah,
equally.
yeah.
There's people who are disabled in certain ways that are different from how other
Exactly.
people are disabled.
So like for limited hand function,
Yeah.
there are devices like wall massager, and there's a Hitachi magic wand, and there's
Okay.
something called Butt Seriously, which is a rectal
Nice.
vibrator.
I like the name there. Yeah.
And there's something called Aslan's Men Harness.
Okay.
So that's for limited hand function. Then there's
Right.
then there's another section for no hand function. And they have some MPP tongue vibrator and a furniture harness.
So did you get into any of these
I
manuals?
did read. I did read a couple of, so the
Okay.
device, the diagrams describing what the device looks like.
Yeah.
And then there are some pictures, and then there's an explanation on how can one use the device, and where
Right.
is it available, and how is it available. So it was quite interesting. There was a whole manual of these devices, and devices not for people with kinks, but people
Who need them. They're
need
like
them,
tools,
with
pretty much.
disability,
Yeah.
with disabilities.
And,
So
and I mean, was this a whole channel, a YouTube channel, or was it a website, or what?
no, it was a website.
Okay.
It was. I have the link.
Did you manage to catch how many people were like left comments or visited or anything of that sort?
I didn't research that much in detail.
I don't know.
I just
maybe
saw
you
it. I
did.
got damn excited, and then
Yeah.
from there I moved on to another link. So,
What is the other link?
well, the other link is that it's very interesting actually.
Okay.
So there are sex assistants,
Okay.
right? Sexual assistants. Because a lot of times, depending on the disability and the level of the disability, if they do not find partners, or they do not find partners, again, who are disabled, or partners who are non-disabled and all, but sex is necessary,
Yeah,
or whatever,
yeah,
for a
sure.
release. So there are these people called sexual assistants who assist disabled people in different forms of sex. So there are websites which provide you sexual assistance, and some
Okay.
websites specify that no intercourse allowed. And it's just not about the sex, right? They
Yeah.
talk to them. It's the first meeting or the first date with the sexual assistant and the client. It starts with just chatting and gentle touching and
Right.
caressing, and
Yeah.
then it progresses.
Yeah.
And-
because it's got to be distinct from so many other things that can be passed off as sexual behavior with regard to, I mean, it's not a date. Let's put it that way. But it's
Yeah,
not.
It's paid. Ultimately, it's paid sex.
Yeah,
right?
but it's not prostitution.
Yeah.
But then what is it? So then they have to establish it somehow, I'm
So at
guessing.
an ethical level also, there were a few debates and
Yeah, I would
arguments on
imagine.
that,
I would imagine that
saying
being the
that
case.
is it prostitution, because ultimately you're helping someone have sex and you're getting money for it, right?
Yeah.
But it's not. In fact, there are training centers. So
Yeah.
I read something called Love Giver, the project. So
Okay.
it's a whole. So the project deals with they train people to become sexual assistants.
Okay.
So it's not like koi bhi aaya aur main to sexual assistant ban gaya ya ban gaya.
Right,
There
yeah.
are courses. You have to give interviews. Only if they approve of you can you even attend their course. And I think, in fact, it's in countries like Germany, Netherlands, Switzerland,
Yeah,
Austria.
yeah.
That's where this Love Giver project kind of functions, where it trains people to become sexual assistants as a professional.
Yeah.
That-
but there's
that's-
so many questions over there. I can understand it being a complex thing to unpack and explain to
Yeah.
people and lawmakers and even the people availing of the sexual assistance themselves. It's so hard to think of this as just a service, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
because they help them find their sexuality also.
yeah, but
and
then
they deal
but
with
then-
homosexuals and
but then you
heterosexuals.
immediately start bonding with people. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's so natural to do that with this.
Yeah, in fact, I read that in Germany, there's this party called the German.
I think you were telling me it was the
I
Green
don't know what
Party,
it was.
right?
Yeah, the German Green
Party. Yeah.
So they had proposed that sex with prostitutes will be paid for by the government.
Okay.
For anyone.
That's going a step further, even.
Yeah, for anyone who's too poor for a hooker, but is deemed to need sexual assistance. So they encourage doctors to issue prescriptions.
Yeah, but did this get legalized in any way?
I don't know. I think the party had
they're
proposed.
proposing
The
this,
spokeswoman had proposed.
Because again,
it.
I can see how many things can go wrong with something like this.
It can completely be used, misused.
Or just be. I mean, what is this really? That's the question that people will start asking, and we don't have an easy answer for stuff like this. It's this topic to really unpack could take us a while, but thankfully we have a very special guest who we will interview right after the break.
Hello there, my name is Naveen Narona, and as a gay person in India, I get asked a lot of stupid questions.
Beta, is it LGBT or eligibility?
How do two men procreate?
Bro, is Grindr better than Tinder or what?
We answer all these questions and much more on my podcast, Keeping It Queer, where I talk to individuals from the LGBT community in India and learn about their personal stories. Catch new episodes of Keeping It Queer every Monday on Audioboom, iTunes Global, SoundCloud, YouTube, or generally any of the podcasting apps. In fact, you can now download the IVM podcast app and listen to it. Happy listening.
Welcome back, and we're joined by Nidhi Goyal, who's a very special guest of ours today. She is going to take us through a lot of issues dealing with sexuality and disability. So say hi, Nidhi.
Hello, hi everyone.
And Nidhi, she does a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to let her introduce herself to us.
So I basically, I have a short introduction, 2 words, 4 words, 4 sentences and 4 pages. So I'll stick to a couple of sentences. But I am basically an activist based in Mumbai, and I work on disability rights and gender justice, as I call it. But what I really do is work on issues that arise at the intersection of disability, gender, and sexuality. My focus up until now has been working for girls and women with disabilities, and a large part of my work constitutes working for the sexual rights of girls and women with disabilities. I really use all the sort of modes and methods and tools, as I call them. So I'm a researcher, I'm a writer, I do advocacy, I run campaigns, and I do stand-up comedy.
You see, it's a lot. It wasn't me. It was really a lot.
The list was daunting.
I would have rambled and got that wrong. I'm sure of it.
So the long and short, if you want to focus on sexuality and disability, is that I am the program director of a program called Sexuality and Disability, run by a Mumbai-based non-profit called Point of View.
Okay, great. So let's start with sexuality and disability itself. How did you get into that program? And
what made you start working on sexuality?
On this topic?
It won't be good if I said I was jobless, and so I started. No, that's not the truth. So I'm a trained mass media professional, and I worked as a journalist. I was writing stories of very, very strong women and women who had done something different in life, combated a lot of things. And I wanted to sort of really make my work in a space that it would impact lives of others. And when I thought, which others? I immediately thought, I want to work for girls and women with disabilities, not only because I am one, so I'm disabled, I'm visually impaired, but also because I thought that that's an intersection, and this was back in 2011, that was an intersection which wasn't really thought about. You know, you thought about women, you thought about disabled people as if they were genderless, but you didn't think about women with disabilities. And when I looked at women with disabilities issues, I was like, okay, which is the issue that nobody really wants to talk about at all? And it was sexual rights. And at the same time, Point of View, in collaboration with Kriya, which is another organization based in Delhi, was working on this amazing sort of pioneering website called sexualityanddisability.org, and they wanted to start that project.
Okay.
And I jumped straight into it as a co-researcher and co-author. So interesting. Yeah.
So can you tell me what was the first thing that you discovered as soon as you got in, the first day on the job, the first issue that hit you? And it was a big revelation in a way.
Maybe not the first issue, but the thing that hit me a lot was this very, very common prejudice. Because, so let me just backtrack a bit. I, as a woman with a disability, come from a very privileged background. Now, by privilege, I don't mean like crorepati or something. By privilege, I mean that I had a very supported family. I'm English speaking. I am in Mumbai. I live in one of the safest cities in India. My experience was really different. And the minute I joined the project, something that really stood out for me was a very basic but widespread prejudice that women with disabilities are asexual.
Okay.
And I'd really not theorized it that way.
Yeah.
Actually, a larger sort of thing, women are considered more asexual, but just people with disabilities are considered asexual.
Okay.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Like,
how do people come? Did you ever figure out how people come to that conclusion?
Before that conclusion, I was like, why don't you just ask people with disabilities?
Yeah.
We'll tell you how sexual we are.
Yeah.
I think it's a very safe conclusion to come to.
Okay.
Because we somehow want to keep disabled people as not normal, right? We either want to keep them lesser than us, less normal or more normal. So the idea is either pity or like this super inspiring being that exists, right?
Okay.
And somehow we push them away. Now, when you say sexuality, when you say sex, when you say relationships, these are very normal issues, like something that people would be like, this is a part of our life, our personal life.
Yeah, and it doesn't get discussed anyway.
And that's another thing, but that's a part of our personal life.
Yeah.
But when these people are not normal, quote unquote, then why would they have a personal life similar to us?
Okay.
And I think this whole sort of idea stems from there, from the discomfort and not wanting to engage with a group.
But then in terms of dating now, like where do people find each other? Let's put it that way.
Okay, again in dating, right? If I had to frame the whole section with one sort of umbrella statement, I'll say that when there's a disability, I'm not complaining that relationships are not happening.
Yeah.
My problem as a disabled person, as a disabled woman, and as an activist is that our attitudes take away the potentiality of disabled people. So we don't look at them as potential partners. And that potential word is really important. Nobody's saying, hey, go date disabled people, because that's your good deed for the day, right? Nobody's saying that. Now, when it comes to dating, if I had to counter ask you both a question, saying where do non-disabled people find their dating partners?
It's the workplace, bars, any social gathering,
and now with the influx
college,
of
school,
a lot of these dating
thing.
groups, dating websites, all of that. So that too.
Right. So when you don't consider someone potential, in most social settings, they're not potential. So that entire thing that you said about offices, colleges, that mostly goes away for people with disabilities. Like if there are 4 women standing and the man is checking out women, and I know I'm framing it in heterosexual relationship sort of framing right now, but it's just an example. He would look over, check out 3, and he would look over the 4th, like ignore the 4th because she's not in the woman's space. So these sort of interpersonal spaces where dating can happen goes away when it's these superficial or like one-time clicks or the sort of nazro se nazre mili kind of a thing. But so as one of you rightly said, there's also the whole technology landscape, right? The whole influx of apps and portals and things like that.
Yeah, a lot of dating sites and socializing sites also.
And that, I think, has, to a certain extent, I'd like to say that, just the socializing sites, Facebook, Twitter, and having sort of access to those have changed, altered lives of people with disabilities. I don't want to take
to hear.
I don't want to take away anything from technology and social sites because it's so easy, particularly imagine a landscape here in India or in countries like India where, you can walk down the road to grab a coffee. If I was in a wheelchair, just to reach a friend to get a coffee at the corner of the street, I would need someone to push me because there is just no way I could navigate the broken roads with no footpaths. And that's something that we forget. It's very easy and natural for us, so we forget that we need infrastructure to enable people. And so in such a space, technology becomes a very good way to connect with people, to keep updated, to have sort of Skype conversations, to Facebook chatting, all of that. So I think I won't take anything away from there. But when I have to talk about dating sites and portals, it's really interesting. Okay, I mean, I'm smiling because I'm a blind woman, and the minute you say, hey, do you use dating apps, and I'm like, well, they didn't think of me when they were making them.
Okay.
Do you know why?
Because it's just assumed that people will swipe left or right or whatever.
You both are sounding very confused. They're like, but what? Okay. Yeah, because you would swipe left or right, but swipe left or right on what? What does that swiping entail? Just an image? And how do I see that image?
Right, yeah.
So that app is out for me. There's another app where there are buttons on left and right saying yes and no. Yeah. So it's very funny because, somebody pointed... So that I took some friends' help saying, Acha, help me register. Yeah, some buttons are not accessible.
Okay.
And I found it very funny being 31 asking some other friends saying, hey, help me to register on this damn dating site.
Yeah.
Nobody has to be, it's a private thing. Why should I be forced to take someone's help on such a thing?
Yeah.
But I'm forced to divulge it to someone that, okay, I am on these 5 dating sites.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I also need your help, which means I can only register when you help me, which is like ridiculous to another level.
Yeah.
And then somebody told me, okay, this left button is yes and right is no, remember. And now that day I remembered. 2 weeks later when I logged onto that site or that app, I opened that app.
Yeah.
I was like, shit, what was yes and what was no? So I just took an estimate and started clicking one side, and then I realized, what am I doing? I was like, okay, maybe I'm just saying yes to someone else and no to someone else.
Exactly,
so I just deleted the app. So
okay.
Just accessibility.
Yeah.
And this, the access is an issue. But what's more concerning for me is the mindset. That when people are making apps, they're just not thinking that there'll be someone disabled on the app, using the app.
Yeah.
That's not what we think. We don't even consider them our target audience.
Right. And I think the other thing is, like you said, a lot of people just expect other people to come and help. Like, but then, she's probably got someone to help her and so it'll work out, right?
Which is brilliant.
Yeah. But I'm sure there must be people who think like that.
I'm very sure.
Yeah.
They're like, why can't they just ask for some help and do it? Why?
Yeah.
I think before that they think, why do they want to be on dating sites?
That's anyway, we've talked about that. But Dilna's actually had something to ask about this, because some people are living at home with their parents, and who do you ask for helping you on your dating site, but only your mom and dad are at home?
And anyway, parents can't deal with the fact that their temporarily able-bodied child also are indulging in sex. So a differently abled child indulging in sex...
And now they need your help to do that.
Yeah, like how does one... how do you get a lot of parents? Do you get a lot of these kind of issues?
Disabled people don't ask.
People don't ask?
Then disabled people don't ask. Because who would want... If you imagine if either of you had to ask your parents for help, would you ask them?
I would really consider it and somehow find a way, but it would be very long and difficult.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to ask my
parents. So also amongst the 2,000 things that you're struggling with and seeking support for, would you really prioritize this? No.
Probably not.
No.
Probably not.
And that's what happens, that our attitudes are forcing disabled people to prioritize their needs. Saying that, okay, now you have only 10 things that you can get. So now tell us, are you dating you really want or what in the first 10? Don't you want education? Don't you want jobs? Don't you want financial security? So this is what we're doing. And that's really problematic. And there are some parents who are dealing with it and who have been very positive.
Okay.
And some parents don't know what to do. They feel equally helpless. They recognize that their daughter or son has turned 18 or 14 or 16 or whatever. In teenage, all their friends are sort of hanging around, rubbing shoulders with whatever each other, being with people they are attracted to, etc. And they just, groups just forget to call you when they're out for movies, or they just find you too burdensome when they have to go for a beach walk, or it's just so parents also feel equally helpless when it comes to this, because socializing is not something that you can fight in the court of law and get for your child. You can fight for education, you can fight for an employment, you can encourage them. What would you encourage a disabled child of yours? How would you encourage them, saying, acha nahi beta, ho jayega, it will happen. Someday the people will start socializing. It's false. You just can't do it.
Right. So what do you tell these parents then who come to ask questions about their kids and their sexuality?
So if parents are already coming and asking, they're at a certain level where they really want to help.
Yeah.
The other thing that, so sometimes we don't have answers. It's not like I'm a disabled woman and I'm an activist, so I have all the answers. It's not like that.
Yeah.
So very recently I was, in an online chat, in a public sort of, we did a Read It AMA from Point of View, Sex Test program. And there was a mother who asked, saying, okay, my daughter has very, very strong limitation on her mobility.
Okay.
She's very active on everything technology can give her. Right? So all the Facebooks of the world, Twitters, blah, blah, everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay? But she just needs one human presence. There's not a single friend who would come and visit her and be with her. And it's difficult to take her out because it's just nothing's accessible. Yeah. And I didn't have an answer for her. She said, I know that she's growing up and she has all these feelings and desires. And then the other threat is because you push someone in such a vulnerable situation that then they're either forced to accept whoever will have them, or they somehow end up accepting whoever will have them because they're like, okay, finally nothing's going to happen. So if this person's horrible, absolutely bad for me, I wouldn't ever give a damn for them if I was non-disabled. I would still go.
Oh, okay, because they should be grateful, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. So it's you'll find it ridiculous, but I was reading on a lot of sexual abuse of women with disabilities.
Okay.
And the most common thing that's passed off is that, why would the perpetrator be interested in you to abuse you, have sex with you? The second is, anyway, you're not getting sex, so why don't you just be grateful that someone had sex with you?
That's pretty horrifying.
Yeah.
But Nidhi, do they, like, I was just reading up, right, and I saw a lot of stuff like sexual assistance and stuff like that.
Right.
So how much of that do we have readily available in India? If one needs sexual assistance, is it something that is there?
I think we also need to find out what that is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
yeah.
I mean, you guys run a show on sex. You know how open we are.
Yeah.
So the answer is very obvious that there is no sexual assistance. There is this whole concept of sexual assistance, sexual surrogacy, sex workers for disabled, etc.
Okay.
The idea is that there are people with disabilities who have sort of severe disabilities, multiple disabilities, who do not find sexual partners. They would need a sexual surrogate who would sort of work with them or with a sex therapist or independently for them to discover in their own body, their sexuality, their needs, etc. Right?
Yeah.
We definitely don't have anything like that in India.
Okay.
Right? Okay. But also, so it's, in a way, if you see where someone's never had sex, is really craving for it, wants to discover himself or herself or, themselves and wants a sexual assistance, that's great. Right?
Yeah.
But the other angle, and which I'm really worried about, is because this idea of sexual assistance is catching on so quickly that I'm really, really worried that again it'll become a ghettoizing of people with disabilities. Saying, Are, you want sex, go to the sexual assistant, Baba. Don't come to the normal society.
Right. Okay.
And it will really become like that.
Okay.
Because as all of us know, people have sex for different reasons. They may just feel like it. They may want to establish intimacy. But if you make this whole sort of sexual assistance the only way, as people would,
right,
then everything else, every flavor of sex is taken away, and it's like, hey, go to this therapist, get a sexual surrogate, or find the sexual assistance, and done.
So you don't see this as a sustainable sort of.
So it's another, when we talk about non-disabled people, right? And I'm giving this comparison so that we just understand it a little more.
Yeah.
When we say, okay, non-disabled people should have access to, if they wanted, casual sex should not be an issue, right?
Right.
We say premarital sex shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
But are we trying to say that there should only be casual sex and not be anything else? So we're saying that there should also be casual sex, and then everything else should also be there. So I think for people with disabilities, it all similarly needs to be a balance where sexual assistance should be accessible, but
Yeah.
We still need to change mindsets.
Okay. So that's, I guess, what you're advocating, right, throughout everything that you try and do, basically, is these are all kinds of solutions or kinds of ways of dealing with the problem, but the real issue is we need to change mindsets.
Yeah. It's just very simple, right? And I'm giving a very sort of basic example here.
Yeah.
I walk on the streets in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And if a child sees me, so say the child is 3, toddler, whatever, and if he says, "What is that?" and asks his mum, the mum shushes him or her, right?
Yeah.
Says, "Shh, don't talk like that." So immediately, as a toddler, I'm like, okay, that's a big sort of scary thing.
Yeah. And you're not
If you have
supposed
a
to
white
talk about
cane
this. Yeah.
and dark glasses, which is again very characterizing. I never use them. I never use the dark glasses, but anyway.
Yeah.
But immediately the image that we grow up with is that it's scary, it's shameful, you don't need to talk about it. Okay, and they're not like us. When I was walking in London and a kid asked his mum saying, "What is that?" And she said, "Okay, get out of the way first, let her walk." And then she explained, and I was walking and I was sort of quietly eavesdropping.
Yeah.
And she explained very casually, saying, "Listen, you need to take care. She's carrying a cane because she can't see. So you have to just respect that and move out of her way. Don't stand there and ask, 'What is that?'"
Nice. Yeah.
So I think this kind of shift, and the whole idea that who are we to evaluate who's less, who's more? Like if I ask between the two of you, who's perfect?
I think Dilnaz will have an answer
I
for
have
that.
nothing to say to that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Does Dilnaz claim that she's perfect? Is that what you're trying to say?
I'm waiting for that day to finally arrive because I feel it's inevitable. Yeah.
Okay. That's like a co-host discussion. I'm not
Correct.
getting into it.
But Nidhi, a lot of times, like this example of the child and the mother in India, or even the example that, like when there are 4 women and one is differently able, you tend to overlook them. Most of the times it's unintentional, right? Like I'm sure the child's mother did not, in fact, intentionally she didn't mean to kind of insult or, and a lot of times, and I'm saying that as a completely like a lay person.
Yeah.
I've said that, I've been politically incorrect sometimes, and I might have said, and I've made mistakes, and I know there are a lot of people who do without the intention of.
Correct.
So is that something, I'm sure initially it must have bothered you. Is that something that still upsets you? Is there a particular way that you kind of deal with it?
So I'm an activist for a reason. Because I'm like, hey, calm down, I'll talk to your child. And I say, beta, aapko chhadi se khelna hai? Do you want to play with the cane? And then the mother's like shocked, saying, what is she doing, right? No, so I completely agree that a lot of sort of, even just very strong prejudices, stigma, they're very unintentional.
Yeah.
Right? But what do? We are socialized in a particular way. Yeah, we have this first interaction with disabilities through our textbooks, where we have a poor image of a blind man standing at the corner of a street, and you're supposed to help them, which evokes a lot of pity.
Yeah.
Right? So we are socialized in that way. But then, another thing to think would be men. If we say Indian men are this or that, they're socialized in that way. Would that then legitimize their behavior if they sort of persisted being in their natural conservative way? So that's another thing that, we are all socialized in a particular way, but when we become adults, it's also up to us to expand our understanding, to sort of challenge our own beliefs, to at least be open to learning.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we somehow, when it's not for us, right? Maybe in some other show, I may end up saying the same thing about some other intersection, right? So it's not so every women's rights activist is not sensitive to disability. Every disability rights activist is not sensitive to caste. But we all need to be sensitive to each other, and that's and we can't legitimize one behavior and not legitimize the other, even as unintentional. And so this is like a serious answer.
Yeah.
The good answer is that I note all these incidents and use them in my stand-up comedy.
That's a good way of dealing with that.
And, I've had people who come up to me and say, shit, I did the same thing the other day. And I was like, yes, you did, of course.
Superb.
So I just think that there are many ways to deal with it. Sometimes it gets frustrating as a disabled person, as an activist, as a woman. Like it's for every woman, right? Like the woman who's dark, the girl who's like darker, has a darker skin tone. She's just fed up of hearing like, oh my God, why don't you apply sunscreen? Why don't you do this? Why don't you just take care a little bit?
Yeah.
The woman who's fat is fed up of it, right? It doesn't mean she forgets how to live or enjoy her life. So I think it's the same with me, saying that, okay, fine, this is frustrating. Okay, next, what do we do about it? Okay, fine, this is dealt with. What do we do next? So...
Can I don't know if you're going to hate me for this, but
no.
Can you tell us your first date, or a date that you've really enjoyed, or I don't know.
Okay, because this is a part
like
of my stand-up comedy.
Okay.
And this is an extra joke that I'm sort of spilling out
Lay the
here.
jokes on.
Great, I love this.
Bring them on.
Sneak peek into her act, by the way.
Yeah, so it's basically, call me for shows, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have this very remarkable sort of incident. I'm not saying it's a remarkable joke. I'm just saying that for me, it was like what just happened. So I was out with this friend of mine who I'd really had a crush on for many, many years in college.
Okay.
And in my early 20s, I finally landed like on a date with him. I was like, wow, my first ever date in life and da-da-da. I was really excited, and I was like, maybe I'm too excited and I'm going to sort of, forget to use my cane or stumble somewhere. You know how you're like very nervous, and then sometimes people are like, oh, I forgot to button my shirt. Put the right accessory or whatever. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll take him to a very familiar restaurant where I frequent. And that's what we did. And we were sitting and chatting. And, after a couple of minutes, he said... And when I say familiar restaurant, okay, let me give a background here and kill the joke a little bit, is because familiar means the restaurant has seen like in total of their existence and thousands of customers, one disabled person coming there.
Okay.
So they always know that it's you, right? They just immediately register. So wherever I go, and if I've been there more than twice or thrice, people are like, oh, ma'am, you've come after such a long time. And I'm like, yeah, thanks. So before the joke, I'll tell you a background. I was once with my parents and we went to this particular restaurant. He's like, ma'am, so happy to see you again. I hope you enjoyed your evening day before. And I'm like, can you just shut up? My parents didn't know about it, right?
Yeah.
So I went with this guy and we're chatting, and suddenly he's like, what would you have? And the waiter came running and he said, sir, ma'am really likes Mexican. And I'm like, okay, I like Mexican men, but how did Mexican food come here? And so then I was like, and my friend decided to play along, and he said, oh, okay, really? Ma'am likes Mexican? He's like, yes, sir, ma'am came here yesterday only with another sir, and she ordered everything Mexican.
Oh my gosh. Nice. Nice.
So there you go.
Off to a great start. Yeah. Amazing.
My first date experience,
So-
which I would never forget.
That's a great story, and I'm sure the rest of the stand-up act is equally amazing. Can you tell us where to find the websites that you work on and places that people can come see your stand-up act, among other things?
Right. So, since we're talking about sexuality and disability, the website that I'd request everyone to see a lot of information around sex relationships just for non-disabled people as well. I mean, you would relate to that information. Is called sexualityanddisability.org.
Okay.
We're also amplifying voices of women with disabilities there. So we had a very interesting dating story by a woman who's an amputee. We've had very interesting sort of heart-wrenching stories of violent relationships by someone who's visually impaired. So, it's also an ongoing sort of a section of the website is sort of thriving, growing, continuous, amplifies voices, etc. The second thing is for people who've not watched and would really want to have a sort of a longer peep into my stand-up, I'm on YouTube in Aditi Mittal's Bad Girls series.
Yeah.
And I think if people want to know what shows are happening where, they just need to follow me on Twitter at Says Nidhi Goyal.
there you have it.
Super.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us and in telling us so much about this topic. We'd love to have you again.
And would you like to say something before we end?
Okay. I actually wanted to add this earlier.
Oh, okay.
So I told you about my first date. But I also want to tell you one more thing.
Okay.
So I was meeting another friend who was visually impaired.
Okay,
right?
okay.
And he was sitting in a restaurant and he called me and he said, I have reached. So when you enter, you walk straight and at the end, I'm on the left table. And I told him, don't worry, don't worry. He's like, what do you mean by don't worry? I'm like, no. He said, I know you're very capable of just asking and coming in. I'm just seeing generally, right? So I'm like, don't worry, I won't have to ask. And he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, if I walk into the restaurant, they'll straight bring me to you. And they did just that.
Right.
Because our idea is that a disabled man would only meet a disabled woman.
Yeah.
And if they're the same disability, even better, because blind and blind match.
Of course. Yeah.
I think those are, I've been on a couple of such forced dates where suddenly my friends become like my date and people are like, the waiters are like smiling at us and people around are very happy that we're together. And this happened when one of my friends was dropping me to a hotel.
I've never heard of this concept before, where everyone is happy you're on a date that you're not on. I think this has never occurred to me.
My friends have also been indicated to spoken at. In Delhi, I have a friend who drops me to my hotel, and one of these days, he was one of the two travels. He was dropping me to the hotel room, and suddenly a gentleman was like, "I hope you both have a wonderful night," and I'm like, "Oh my god!"
Really went out of his way there. Really went
out of his way.
Yeah.
But that's what we do, right? We like disabled people with disabled people, so we ensure that they are together.
Oh man, superb. But yeah, anything else?
So, again, I was Googling and that's my best friend these days, Google.
Of course.
So I was, there are a lot of dating apps for disabled people. Like there was something called Dating for Disabled. And then there was something called specialbridge.com, which is not necessarily for disabled, not necessarily for dating, but it was said that a lot of disabled people find it difficult to just socialize and make friends, So there are a lot of these special kind of apps, dating sites for disabled people. So do we have a lot of these? Do we have any of these out here in India? First of all, again, after listening to the whole conversation that I've had with you, I'm not sure if these apps are a good idea because we're again marginalizing them, but
correct.
Yeah.
So, it's an ironic, like it's a paradox. And I want to lay it out here. That again, you already got onto it saying, I don't think sort of ghettoizing people or separating them and saying this is an app for you, this is a website for you, come here, join it, find partners, is again that match the disability kind of thing. Having said that, there are a few apps, there are a few websites, marriage portals. There are also many marriage bureaus which do this, say that we get disabled people married. Because ultimately that's the aim of life, right?
Yeah. That doesn't change for anybody.
Thanks for catching on to the irony. It's like, that's the aim of life. So we get disabled people married. But you'll also find that a lot of people with disabilities do subscribe to them. Now you'd be like, but if you're feeling so discriminated, why are you encouraging these people, right? It's because when you're on other platforms, you're so you feel so discriminated, so diminished and so less that you just don't want to be on there. When every time someone sees your wheelchair and they're like, okay, I can't date you. Or when they find out you have some other disability that they're like, okay, this is a bit too much to handle. You'd rather be on platforms where people are treating you equally. And that's why a lot of disabled people are finding disabled partners. They're like, at least someone will sort of have this mutual respect and then the disability will be kept aside and we'll really meet as people. So this is what is happening.
So it's got its pro and con kind of...
I won't call it really the positive. I just want to say that it is a consequence of our behavior. That we are sort of marginalizing them so much or we are making them feel so less that they're subconsciously forced into spaces for them where they would feel dignified and equal.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been lovely having you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really, really enjoyed talking to both.
Yeah, it was really good. We learned a lot today.
Yeah, it's been like a bit of an eye-opening for me at least.
Yeah. You can find Sex Vex on Audio Boom, YouTube, Stitcher, the IVM podcast app, or any other podcasting app that you prefer. If you're trying to find us on iTunes India, you might have some trouble finding us because of the language used on the show. So make sure you change your location first.
Hey man, just help me out, man. I need some podcasts, man. I haven't had a fix in a week. Just need some.
Don't you worry about it. I got podcast galore for you, man. Just go to ivmpodcast.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Thanks, man. I'm gonna check it out.